Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about why you should print your photos, and not just why you should print them, but what you get out of printing it, a few different ways you can consider printing your photos, as well as a few different options on how you can mount the photos if you wanted to have them framed or printed onto something like a canvas as well. As a landscape photographer, and I'm sure many other photographers will agree with this as well, one of the most satisfying feelings you get is when you actually see your photo printed onto a piece of paper or canvas. Because it's the culmination of the entire photography process. It's all the time and effort you've spent into learning the art of photography, practicing with your camera the way that different settings will affect the photos in different ways, purchasing all the gear that you would want to have to be able to go out to take new photos. Granted, not all of us will probably ever have the gear we want. I'm always on the hunt for new gear. But then also going home and post-processing the photos to try and make it something amazing to look at from when you were there at that particular point in time. And it's the final step of the process where you've actually taken that photo that you've learned how to take, you've gone out and taken it, you've edited it, and then you finally printed it. And it's on a piece of hard paper or canvas, whatever it may be, that you can actually physically hold in your hands instead of just look at on a computer monitor or your phone. I do want to say as well that it is actually quite inspiring when you print out your photos, not just for yourself, but hopefully for other people and other photographers as well. Whenever I myself have printed out one of my photos, whether it's just for me as a test print or because I want to keep it on my own wall, or I'm sending it off to a customer because they've purchased one and I want to make sure it's up to standards before it actually gets sent to them, it always makes me want to go out and try and get a better photo than what I previously done. It never makes me want to just sit and think, that's the best I can do, now I just have to try and replicate it. That's the best I've done so far, and how can I actually go and do better now? And that's one of the great things about it, is that it makes you want to try and be better with all the information and practice and knowledge that you've gained to go and try and improve. Because part of the printing process is not just going out and taking the photo, but it's also how you edit it. Have you cropped it in a way that what you want to have included is included, and have you also excluded the parts of the photo that you don't want to have included in the frame? Like if you have to crop out a little bit to get rid of a few stray leaves or branches in a scene, or if there's a side of a building that you don't want to have in the frame, or have you actually cropped it properly? And then also further into the editing process, if you remember a couple weeks ago I showed you how I added the Orton effect to a few of my photos. It allows me to see whether applying that Orton effect has actually improved it on a piece of paper and not just on a monitor. Because whilst it may look great on a monitor, that doesn't always translate onto paper. And at least by printing it, I can then see, should I have applied it to the whole, when I say applied it, I mean the Orton effect, should I have applied it to the whole image if I haven't? And if I have applied it to the whole image, are there some areas where I shouldn't apply it to try and make that photo even better? And that's something you would only learn when you actually print it out versus looking at it on a monitor. And the best part is, you don't even have to be a professional photographer to go and get your photos printed. It could just be a hobby you're really passionate about, and you've got an amazing photo that you're really happy with, that once you actually do print it out and either keep it on your desk as a flat piece, or like I used to do in Sydney, just blue tack it to the wall, which I do not advise because after a while the blue tack doesn't come off. So just bear that in mind, blue tack is not the best option. But you will get a great sense of satisfaction and achievement from printing out the photo that you may not otherwise get from just editing it and then leaving it and maybe posting it on social media. Granted, there's nothing wrong with just posting your photos on social media. I just find actually printing it gives you a much greater feeling than not printing it, and that's why I'm a strong advocate for actually printing your photos. Now, I realize it's all well and good for me to say this is why you should print out your photos, because there are so many benefits to it, from the learning experience and the satisfaction and the inspiration that comes from it. But there are also a few caveats to bear in mind when you are printing your photos. One of them is that when you are editing on a monitor, you do have to bear in mind that whatever is on the monitor is always going to be brighter than what comes out on paper because our monitors are backlit. And there are a few workarounds on that. One option is to go and calibrate your monitor. I actually use the Spider Edge Pro to calibrate mine. And full disclosure, I'm not sponsored by Datacolor to talk about their monitor calibrator. Nothing has exchanged hands. I did my own research on it, and when it was on sale, I went and purchased it. So this is purely my opinion on it. I do find that at least by calibrating the monitor, it has made my colors more accurate. Some will say you don't need to calibrate the monitors because the differences are so minimal that you won't notice it. But I like to err on the side of caution when I do something, so that's why I've gone and calibrated it. Another option is you can actually just increase your exposure slider by 1/3 of a stop in your photo editing software, whether it's Photoshop or Lightroom or Capture One. And at least that way, it provides you a good buffer that whatever you see on the monitor is actually going to come out on paper as well. There have been a few times where I forgot to do that. I'll be the first one to admit. And then when the print came out and it was a bit dark, I was sitting there thinking, what have I done wrong? And then I realized it's the monitor. And the monitor I was using at the time, the one back in Sydney, was so insanely bright that I actually needed to increase the exposure by 2/3 of a stop, not 1/3 of a stop. So that's just something to be aware of. How bright your monitor is will actually affect the color, well, the brightness of the print and whether it comes out really dark or just a little bit dark. And if you are going to print out photos, depending on the sizes you want to print, depends on what you should do to print it. If you're just wanting to print small pages to put in like a 4x6 frame or an A4 size one to hang up on the wall, most home office printers nowadays, the inkjet ones that you can get from like HP, Canon, Epson, or whichever brand you prefer, are normally pretty good. The only struggle you may get is finding something besides glossy paper, is at which point you'd have to go to like a dedicated Photoshop. And the only reason I'm not a fan of glossy paper is I find it's very, very, very reflective and doesn't suit all of my photos very well. As a landscape photographer, I like to print as big as I can, and I do believe that for landscape photos and a lot of other photography genres, size matters and bigger is better. As an example, I've got two photos here of exactly the same photo, I should say. This one was about 60 by 40 centimeters, including the border. This one was 50 by 70 without the border. And having looked at both of them, I can say that I'm much happier with the larger one than I am with the smaller one. And that's because when you do print landscape photos, if it's not printed very large, like an A4 size as an example, it will be very hard to see some of the detail that may be there in the photo. Whereas when you print a large one like that, 50 by 70, seeing the details a lot easier. You won't have to get as close or even get out a magnifying glass to try and zoom in to see all the detail that is there. But at the same time, it does depend on the type of photo you've got. But I do like to include detail in my photos, and I want to have as much viewing distance as possible, so that's why I like to print large. And one thing I found with printing, especially for landscape photos, is that if you print a smaller one, because there could be quite a few contrasting colors and quite a lot of detail, it looks a lot messier than it does if you print it big. And that's one good thing with the larger size prints as well, is that you don't have to squint and get really up close to the image to see the detail. You can see it from a bit of a distance away, and the detail will stand out more because it's not so compressed next to each other that it can even look a little bit messy. I actually tried it once in an A4 one and I really didn't like it, and I actually binned it because I really was not happy with how it came out. And that's why I like to print them as large as I can. And this depends on whatever photography genre you're shooting in. Portraits can get away with an A4 much better than a landscape can. And same with product photography as well, because of the amount of detail is in there for a landscape that may not be there for a portrait or a product photo. And the type of paper you print on will actually affect how the photo looks. These photos were both printed on a 315 GSM photo rack paper, which has a little bit of texture to it, not too much, but enough so that it actually adds to the photo itself. I mentioned earlier that you would have to go to like a dedicated specialty shop if you wanted to get more than just glossy photo paper. And that's because glossy paper is very good at reflecting lights and really punching the colors and giving them a lot more pop than something like a photo rack paper or even a matte paper would. Matte paper is very good if you wanted to have a very muted look, because that's the sort of feeling you want to invoke with the image. Gloss is more for very poppy colors that really want to punch and stand out, and you want it to reflect everything. I'm a fan of the photo rag mostly. I do have a few that would work with metallic prints, like this one from Turmetta Beach I tried in Sydney, came out very nicely on metallic. If you are just printing at home on like a home office inkjet printer, I would still recommend getting a semi-gloss paper if you can, because that way there won't be as much reflection from it and you can actually see the photo better without having to look at it from weird angles because of all the reflection from a glossy paper. So that's another thing to bear in mind, how the paper that you're printing on will actually affect the photos that you're printing out and the sort of look and feel that you want it to have as well. Do you want it to have that poppy, punchy color look to it, or do you want it to have that soft, moody, ethereal sort of look to it? Depending on what you're printing will depend on what it is you're going to use and should use as well. On top of choosing how you're going to print it and what you're going to print your photo on, There's also the mounting options. Now, getting prints themselves isn't an overly expensive process. It's when you decide how you're going to mount it is where the prices could jump up quite a bit. As an example, this is just a basic frame from IKEA. I didn't want anything overly fancy and elaborate. I wanted something nice and simple. But if you did want something more elaborate and you did need to get a custom size and frame done, then it can cost significantly more. There is also the option to mount your photo onto foam core or gator board, which is effectively a small thin piece of foam between two pieces of very, very thin cardboard. But that provides it with a bit more thickness for the frame and also a bit more rigidity at the back of the frame to try and keep it more stable. But then at the same time, that comes with the cost of trying to find one large enough to accommodate your print so you don't have to use multiple pieces, which will often not fit together perfectly from my experience. So that's just a few things to bear in mind when it comes to actually printing your photos. On top of printing onto paper, there's also the option to print it onto canvases such as fabric or acrylic or even metal canvas as well. And which one you choose there depends on the sort of image you're going to use and also where you're going to hang it up. Fabric canvas, I found, works best if there isn't a lot of detail in the photo. If you wanted to have that very soft painting look, that's when a canvas would come in handy because you are actually going to lose quite a bit of detail on it. I tried it once on a star show photo and most of the stars had disappeared in the printing process, so it's just not something I would recommend for a photo with lots of details. The acrylic and the metal printing, in comparison, they're great in similar to the glossy style where you really want to give the colors a bit more pop and punch compared to what you would get with a matte or a luster style paper because you really want everything to stand out a lot more. And you can also get them so that they are designed to withstand the elements if you wanted to hang it outside on the balcony like in your backyard or something like that. So depending on the type of photo that you're going to be doing will actually affect the type of canvas print that you can choose as well. Whether you want fabric, metal, or acrylic, or if you want to stick to plain or simple paper and put your own custom frame around it. There's really no limits to it. It all depends on what you prefer to go ahead with. Do I think you should print out your photos? Absolutely. Do you have to be a professional photographer to enjoy the printing process? Definitely not. Even if it's just a hobby you're really passionate about, or you've just got an amazing photo from a trip or a day out that you want to have captured as a memory and hung up on your wall or on your desk, get it printed out and you'll find yourself much more satisfied and inspired to want to do more by having that photo there for you to always look at as well. I hope everything today I've made sense. If you do have any questions about any of it, don't forget to leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you have liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. That will be greatly appreciated. And if you do want to stay up to date and make sure you don't miss out on any future videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tick that little bell so you get a notification whenever a new video comes out. But I'll leave it there for now because I actually do want to go and take more photos now that I've got this one framed. I actually want to go and hit the streets a bit more and take more photos there. Fingers crossed I'll walk back with something that I'll be happy enough to print with, but as I mentioned, it's a learning process and I haven't done street photography in years. But I'll stop rambling for now. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night or day, whenever time you're watching this.